I want to paint a picture for you today.
Okay.
Imagine you were standing right in the middle of Central Park.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Right. It is the fall of 1980. The energy in the air is it's absolutely electric. You are surrounded by this massive sea of people.
Yeah, an estimated 400,000 fans packed onto the Great Lawn.
Exactly, 400,000. And they are all gathered there to see one of the most culturally dominant forces on the planet. I mean, this is an artist who, over the course of his life, will sell more than 300 million records.
Which is a staggering number to even try and wrap your head around.
It really is. And he'll eventually become the 19th person in human history to achieve EGOT status, sweeping the Emmys, the Grammys, Oscars, Tonys. He is a literal living legend.
Titan of the industry.
Right. So the crowd is roaring. They're waiting for this musical genius to take the stage. And when he finally does, what is he wearing? What is his grand sartorial statement to 500,000 adoring New Yorkers?
He comes out dressed in a giant, cumbersome, incredibly ridiculous Donald Duck costume, complete with the bill and the tail. It is so absurd. It's one of the most delightfully surreal images in the history of rock and roll. And honestly, it is the perfect visual metaphor for the man we are talking about today.
It really is.
Because you have this juxtaposition, right? The staggering, world historic, musical genius wrapped inside the most absurd, colorful, cartoonish exterior imaginable.
Exactly. And that contrast is exactly our mission on this deep dive today.
Yeah.
We aren't here to just, read you a Wikipedia page or rattle off a list of chart positions.
Right. Anyone can look that up.
Exactly. We're going on a deep dive to uncover the hidden, often contradictory mechanics of a career that has spanned over 6 decades. We really want to understand how a shy, incredibly anxious, classically trained kid from a highly restrictive household somehow turns into a global icon pounding the piano in a duck suit.
Yeah, the journey from point A to point B is wild.
And we are going to explore how answering a random, almost blind date-style newspaper ad led to a 50-year songwriting partnership that supposedly never had a single argument.
Which, honestly, in the music industry might be the single most unbelievable fact of all.
Truly.
My role today is to really dig into that. I want to try and connect these wild, larger-than-life anecdotes to the broader psychological and cultural picture. We want to explore not just what this artist did, but why it happened the way it did, and why his journey actually matters to you.
And I am here to make sure we stay completely out of the dense musical jargon.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, we're going to keep this approachable, we're going to keep it moving, and we are going to have some fun. Okay, let's unpack this. Before the knighthood, before the massive Oscar parties, before the glasses that lit up with his name, we have to travel back in time.
Way back.
We are going back to post-war Britain. Specifically, a council house in Pinner, Middlesex, in the early 1950s.
Right. And for our global listeners, it's important to understand what a council house implies in the UK.
Yeah, set the scene for us.
It is public housing. We are talking about modest working-class beginnings, often with tight quarters and thin walls. In 1947, a boy named Reginald Kenneth Dwight is born into this environment. And if you want to understand the flamboyant superstar he later becomes, you absolutely have to understand the pressure cooker that was Reggie Dwight's childhood.
Pressure cooker seems like the perfect term. The picture the sources paint of his family life is, it's incredibly tense.
Extremely tense. He was raised by his father, Stanley, and his mother, Sheila. Stanley was actually a trumpet player for the Royal Air Force.
Which you would think is a good thing.
You'd think a professional musician would be thrilled to have an incredibly musically gifted son. But paradoxically, Stanley wanted Reginald to go into a very conventional, secure career.
He kept pushing him toward banking, right?
Yes, bank.
Wait, really? A literal trumpet player is telling his kid, no, put down the sheet music, go be a banker. That has to mess with a kid's head.
It absolutely did. The household was strict, and his parents had vehement, explosive arguments. Stanley was largely disapproving of Reginald, and he was often physically absent due to his military postings.
That sounds incredibly isolating.
It was. But even amidst all this domestic tension, all this arguing and rigidity, there was this absurd, undeniable, natural talent bubbling up in young Reggie.
And when we say absurd, we mean prodigy-level absurd. I read that when he was just a little boy, within a year of simply messing around on his grandmother's piano, he was able to pick out the melody to the Skater's Waltz.
Just by listening to it.
Just entirely by ear.
That auditory processing ability is something you simply cannot teach. and it only compounded as he grew.
Yeah.
By the time he was 11 years old, he won a junior scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music in London.
Which is no small feat.
No, it is one of the most prestigious musical institutions in the world. And there's a specific anecdote from his time there that really illustrates his terrifying level of talent.
I love this story.
One of his instructors recalled a moment where he asked Reginald to play back a 4-page piece by Handel.
And keep in mind, a 4-page classical piece is a massive amount of complex musical data.
Exactly. It's not just a melody. It is the underlying harmonic structure, the rhythm, the dynamics. The instructor played it once. Just once.
Unbelievable.
Reginald sat down and played it back flawlessly. The instructor later described him doing it like a gramophone record.
Oh.
It was essentially a photographic memory, but for sound.
Okay, so he's a Mozart-level prodigy. You would just assume he's locked in a room practicing scales for 8 hours a day, right? Driven by this strict father and this prestigious academy.
That is the logical assumption, but no. The sources describe him as a bit of a slacker during this period.
Really?
Yeah, he openly admitted later that he resented going to the academy. He would literally skip his Saturday classes just to ride around aimlessly on the London Underground.
Just riding the tube instead of going to class.
Exactly. He was scraping through his grades without even bothering to practice.
Which is infuriating for any of us who had to take piano lessons and struggled with chopsticks. But it points to a really interesting clash of cultures in his life at that moment.
It really does. What's fascinating here is the deep duality of his musical education.
Tell me more about that.
On one hand, you have the highly rigid, heavily structured, traditional classical environment of the Royal Academy. It's all about playing the notes exactly as written on the page.
Right, very disciplined.
But on the other hand, you have his intuitive, highly rebellious nature. At home, his parents were keen record buyers. So while he's being steeped in Bach and Chopin at school, at home he is listening to Elvis Presley, Bill Haley, and most importantly, Little Richard and Jerry Lewis.
Oh, you can completely see the through line there. Little Richard pounding the keys, standing up, screaming into the microphone. It's the exact antithesis of the Royal Academy.
Precisely. He is absorbing this wild, pounding, sweat-drenched rock and roll entirely by ear. He is learning 2 completely different languages of music simultaneously.
And while he's absorbing all this, the domestic situation finally fractures. When Reginald is 14, his parents divorce.
Yes.
His mom eventually marries a local painter named Fred Fairbrother. And Reggie affectionately calls him Durf, which is just Fred spelled backward.
That's a great detail.
And this is a huge turning point, isn't it? Because Durf and his mom actually support his musical ambitions.
They don't just support him in theory, they actively facilitate his career. They help him get a gig playing piano at a nearby pub called the Northwood Hills Hotel when he is only 15 years old.
I love this image so much. You have a 15-year-old Reggie Dwight playing Thursday to Sunday nights at a local English pub, pounding out covers of Ray Charles and Jim Reeves.
It's a great visual.
But here's the best detail. He's wearing horn-rimmed glasses while he plays, but he doesn't actually need them.
Right.
He had perfect 20/20 vision as a teenager. He is wearing them specifically to imitate his idol, Buddy Holly.
Which is incredibly revealing. He's already trying on different personas.
Yeah.
He is literally putting on a mask. Those non-prescription glasses were the very first step in creating a character that was larger, braver, and much more extroverted than the shy, anxious boy from the council house in Pinner.
That makes total sense.
If we look at that deeply, it raises a compelling point of speculation. You have this tense, restrictive childhood with a disapproving father pushing him toward banking. Then you have this incredible release valve of pub performing, nurtured by a supportive stepfather.
Right.
When this artist later emerges with the most outrageous, flamboyant stage personas imaginable, the duck suits, the Statue of Liberty costumes, you have to ask, was the sheer outrageousness of his later career a direct, delayed rebellion against the restrictive, high-pressure environment of Reginald Dwight?
I mean, he's basically said as much, hasn't he? He later stated that the wild costumes were his way of finally letting go after that restrictive childhood. He couldn't be wild at home. He couldn't be wild at the Royal Academy. So he saved all that pent-up wildness for the stage.
Exactly. The stage became his safe space to be entirely uninhibited. But raw talent and a desire to rebel are only part of the equation. You need the songs. You need a vehicle for that talent.
Right. How does the pub player, Reggie Dwight, actually transform into the global superstar? Because you can play the best Ray Charles cover in the world, but that doesn't sell 300 million records.
It does not.
That brings us to the origin of not just his legendary stage name, but his ultimate creative partnership.
The major turning point happens in 1967. Reginald is out of school. By day, he is working a completely unglamorous job running errands for a music publishing company.
Paying his dues.
Exactly. By night, he is playing in a blues band called Bluesology. He is desperately looking for a way to break out as a songwriter. So he answers an advertisement in the British music paper, the New Musical Express.
Okay, let me jump in real quick. For those who might not know the industry terms, an A&R manager stands for artist and repertoire. Basically, it's the person at a record label whose entire job is to scout new talent and oversee their artistic development. So answering this ad is Reggie's Hail Mary pass to get noticed by the industry. The ad was placed by Ray Williams, who was an A&R manager for Liberty Records.
Exactly. So Reginald goes into the audition, but he has a problem. He can write incredible melodies, but he admits he is terrible at writing lyrics.
You just can't do the words.
Right. So Ray Williams, the A&R guy, just reaches onto his desk, grabs an unopened envelope of lyrics that had been mailed in by someone else, and hands it to Reginald. He says, "Here, see what you can do with these."
And the person who mailed in that envelope, another totally unknown kid who had answered the exact same newspaper ad, a lyricist named Bernie Taupin.
The butterfly effect of that single random unopened envelope is absolutely staggering.
It's crazy to think about.
Reginald takes the lyrics home, writes music to them, sends the tape to Taupin, and they begin a partnership that is still going strong today. They didn't even meet in person right away. They started their collaboration entirely through the mail.
It is the ultimate musical blind date, and it's right around this time, about 6 months after that fateful meeting, that Reginald Dwight decides he needs a name that sounds like a rock star.
Reggie Dwight just wasn't going to cut it.
No. So he takes the names of 2 of his bandmates in Bluesology. He takes Elton from the saxophonist Elton Dean and John from the vocalist Long John Baldry. He becomes Elton John.
And he actually legally changed his name to Elton Hercules John a few years later, in 1972.
And I always assumed Hercules was some grand statement about mythological strength, maybe a reflection of his growing ego. But no.
No, not at all.
He took the name Hercules from a horse in the British sitcom Steptoe and Son.
Yeah.
He was just a massive fan of this gritty, working-class television comedy.
I think that detail is brilliant because it highlights his innate sense of humor and his deep affection for British pop culture. Even as he was becoming this glamorous, untouchable superstar, he was anchoring his legal name to a gag from a local sitcom.
That's so true.
It shows he never completely severed ties with his roots.
That's a really great point. But let's get back to the partnership with Bernie Taupin, because this is where the story gets really, really weird. We know they wrote some of the greatest songs of the 20th century. But it's how they wrote them that is so mind-blowing.
What's fascinating here is the unique mechanics of their collaborative process. It defies almost every single convention of songwriting you can think of.
Right. Because when I picture legendary songwriting duos, Lennon and McCartney, Jagger and Richards, I picture them huddled over a single piano in a smoky room.
Yeah, fighting over a melody.
Exactly. Arguing over a chord change, hashing out the lyrics line by line, intensely collaborating in real time. But Elton and Bernie, they are literally never in the same room when they write.
Never. The process, as detailed extensively in our sources, is incredibly segmented. Think of it less like a traditional kitchen where 2 chefs are bumping elbows and fighting over the seasoning, and more like a highly efficient, perfectly oiled assembly line.
An assembly line of hits.
Exactly. Bernie Taupin writes a batch of lyrics entirely on his own. He writes incredibly fast, often finishing a complete lyric in under an hour.
Wow.
He then hands those lyrics to Elton. Elton goes into a room, sits at the piano completely alone, looks at the words, and writes the music in about 30 minutes.
30 minutes? That is insane.
And if he can't come up with something within that half-hour window, he doesn't agonize over it. He doesn't go back to Bernie and ask him to change a verse or tweak a chorus.
What does he do?
He physically throws the lyrics in the bin and moves on to the next sheet of paper.
Wait, I have to push back on this. You're telling me that for 50 years, with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, massive egos, the pressure of record labels, they never once argued about a song. No passive-aggressive notes, no studio blow-ups.
According to both of them, no. As Elton stated in a 2017 interview, they have never had a professional or personal argument in over 50 years of collaboration.
That is just baffling to me.
And when you analyze their process, you understand why. By completely separating the lyric writing from the music writing, they effectively removed ego and immediate creative friction from the equation.
Ah, I see.
Bernie has total undisputed autonomy over the words. Elton has total undisputed autonomy over the music. They never step on each other's toes because they are never standing in the same room.
I want you, the listener, to just think about that for a second. Think about any group project you've ever been part of at school or at work. Now imagine doing that exact project for 50 years under the intense scrutiny of the global media and never having a single argument.
It's unheard of.
It's a complete anomaly in human behavior, let alone in the music industry.
It invites some really interesting speculation, too. Would this partnership have survived if they had been forced into that traditional model?
Probably not.
If an A&R executive had locked them in a studio and said, okay, boys, jam together until you have a hit, would they have killed each other?
Almost certainly.
The volatility of the music business tears bands apart every single day over the smallest creative differences. By giving each other that absolute freedom and distance, they created an impenetrable, argument-free workflow.
And man, did that workflow produce results. Although it wasn't instant magic. In 1968, they started out as staff songwriters for DJM Records.
Right.
They were basically functioning as a factory, churning out easy-listening tunes for other artists. They even wrote a song for the Scottish singer Lulu called I Can't Go On Living Without You. It was submitted to be the UK entry for the Eurovision Song Contest in 1969.
I love this piece of trivia.
And it came in dead last out of 6 songs.
Which is a comforting thought, isn't it? It just goes to show that finding your artistic voice takes time, even for undeniable geniuses. Writing generic pop for other people wasn't utilizing their true potential. They needed to pivot.
They had to start writing for themselves.
Yes, they needed to start writing more complex, deeply personal material that Elton himself could perform.
And that pivot resulted in his debut album, Empty Sky, in 1969. It didn't make massive waves, but it set the stage. Then came the self-titled Elton John album in 1970.
That was the breakthrough.
That album gave the world Your Song, his first major hit single. And that single kicked off a level of output and dominance in the 1970s that is almost mathematically hard to comprehend today.
The sheer stamina required for what followed is staggering. Between 1972 and 1975, Elton John achieved 7 consecutive #1 albums in the United States.
7 in a row.
7. That was an entirely unprecedented feat at the time. To put that in perspective, he released albums like Honky Chateau, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Caribou, Captain Fantastic, and The Brown Dirt Cowboy, and Rock of the Westies, all #1.
That's an unbelievable run.
He was essentially releasing a genre-defining, culturally massive album every 6 to 9 months.
That volume is just insane. In today's industry, an artist might take 3 to 5 years between major album cycles. Elton and Bernie were writing and recording these masterworks in a matter of days or weeks, often while actively touring.
They were machines.
And to illustrate just how big he was during this era, I want to bring up his collaboration with John Lennon.
Oh, this is a phenomenal story.
He really is. Elton played piano and provided backing vocals on John Lennon's solo track, Whatever Gets You Through the Night. While they were recording, Elton boldly bet Lennon that the song would hit #1 on the charts.
And Lennon didn't believe him.
Not at all. Lennon, who was a bit insecure about his commercial viability at the time, thought there was no way. So he promised Elton that if the song actually hit #1, he would join Elton on stage for a live performance.
And you have to understand, by 1974, John Lennon was terrified of playing live. He had largely retreated from the stage after the Beatles broke up.
Right. But the song did hit #1. And, true to his word, Lennon showed up. He joined Elton on stage at Madison Square Garden on Thanksgiving night in November 1974.
I can only imagine the energy in that room.
The crowd went absolutely ballistic. They performed that track, plus Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and the early Beatles hit. I saw her standing there. But what makes that specific anecdote so incredibly poignant is looking back at it with historical hindsight.
Yes, because that night at Madison Square Garden turned out to be John Lennon's final major live performance before his tragic death in 1980.
Wow.
Elton John's sheer gravitational pull, his massive popularity, and his sheer enthusiasm were the exact forces needed to coax the next Beatle back out onto the stage one last time.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've talked about the musical triumphs, the unbreakable songwriting formula, the historic chart dominant.
The bright side of the fame.
Exactly. But as the 1970s wore on, the pressure of that exact dominance began to crack the foundation. The fame started to manifest physically. The costumes got wildly out of control, and behind the scenes, his personal life was plunging into absolute chaos.
We had touched on this idea earlier, how the stage persona was initially a joyful release from his strict childhood, but by the mid-1970s, it had mutated.
Mutated how?
It escalated from a fun performance choice into a desperate form of psychological armor. The stage wardrobe wasn't just a pair of quirky Buddy Holly glasses anymore. He was wearing massive headdresses of ostrich feathers.
Right, the extravagant outfits.
He wore $5,000 spectacles that literally spelled his name in flashing lights. He wore towering platform boots that made it difficult to walk. He performed entire sets dressed as the Statue of Liberty or as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, complete with the powdered wig.
And it wasn't just a fashion statement, was it?
No, it was a barricade. He was constructing these massive, distracting visual edifices so that the audience wouldn't look too closely at the man underneath.
That's incredibly sad.
He was living at the absolute extremes of the human experience. On one side of the curtain, he is arguably the single biggest pop star on the planet, radiating joy and energy. But behind closed doors, he was struggling with life-threatening addictions and profound insecurity.
The sources are really stark about this period. By 1975, the immense pressures of his relentless touring and recording schedule were taking a severe, undeniable toll. During a period that the media dubbed Elton Week in Los Angeles in 1975, which culminated in 2 massive sold-out shows at Dodger Stadium, he suffered a severe cocaine overdose.
The fuel required to maintain the Elton John machine was increasingly chemical, and it wasn't just narcotics. He developed a severe alcohol addiction. He also battled bulimia for years.
That specific detail about the bulimia is heartbreaking, especially when you consider who he eventually confided in. In a deeply candid interview with Larry King in 2002, Elton discussed his battle with the eating disorder. He revealed that he and Princess Diana actually shared that exact same struggle.
Oh, really?
Yes, they confided in each other. 2 of the most famous, most photographed people in the world, both quietly suffering from the same brutal disorder while constantly in the public eye.
It highlights the extreme isolation of that level of fame. When you are that famous, your peer group of people who actually understand your day-to-day reality shrinks to almost zero.
And yet, he kept performing. Which brings us back to that 1980 concert in Central Park. Let's look at that Donald Duck costume again with this new context.
It changes everything.
It really does. Imagine the sheer dark surrealism of that moment. You have 500,000 people cheering with pure joy for a man dressed as a cartoon duck playing classical-infused rock piano, while the man inside the suit is actively dying from addiction and eating disorders.
It is a devastating image when you strip away the bright colors, and he lived in that dangerous, chaotic space for a long time. He didn't achieve sustained sobriety until 1990.
A full decade later, how did he finally break out of it? Because so many legacy artists from that era sadly never made it out.
The catalysts for his survival are incredibly poignant, and they speak to his underlying deep empathy. He attributes his ultimate wake-up call to spending time with the family of Ryan White.
For our younger listeners who might not know, who was Ryan White?
Ryan White was a teenage boy from Indiana who became a national poster child for the HIV/AIDS crisis in the United States during the 1980s.
Okay.
He was a hemophiliac who tragically contracted HIV through a contaminated blood treatment. At the time, there was immense, paralyzing stigma and fear surrounding the disease. Ryan was actually expelled from his middle school because of his diagnosis.
That's awful.
Elton John befriended Ryan and his family, and he was deeply moved by how they handled this horrific injustice.
Elton later said that seeing the grace, the dignity, and the sheer courage of the White family made him look at his own life in the mirror. He realized that while this family was fighting for their son's life with such nobility, his own lifestyle was, in his words, crazy and out of order. He was complaining about hotel rooms while this kid was fighting a terminal illness.
That perspective shift was vital. He also credited a specific piece of music as a catalyst.
Which song?
He cited the 1986 song Don't Give Up by Kate Bush and Peter Gabriel as playing a significant part in his rebirth. Specifically, the lyrics about resting your head and not worrying too much. The concept that it is okay to admit defeat, ask for help, and start over.
But getting clean isn't just about stopping the substance abuse. For an artist, it brings up a terrifying creative challenge. How do you maintain your creative identity when the substances you've relied on for decades to fuel your art are suddenly removed.
That is the great hurdle for so many artists who get sober. They are terrified that the magic was in the drugs, not in themselves. Elton faced this head-on with his 1992 album, The One.
Wow.
He admitted very openly that it was his first album recorded 100% sober, and he didn't sugarcoat it. He said the process was tough. He was completely unmoored because he was so used to making records, writing melodies, and performing under the heavy haze of alcohol or drugs.
You essentially have to relearn how to walk. You have to learn how to trust your own raw instincts without the chemical crutch you've used your entire adult life.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the release of The One and his newfound sobriety represent a massive tectonic shift in his life.
In what way?
Getting clean didn't just save his physical life, it unlocked a completely new era of his cultural impact.
Yeah.
He didn't just survive the 80s, he transformed into a figure of incredible philanthropy and statesmanship in the 1990s. He weaponized his fame and his vast wealth for profound social good.
Weaponized is the perfect word, because the 1990s started with immense tragedy for him. He lost Ryan White in 1990, and then just a year later in 1991, he lost his very close friend, Freddie Mercury, the legendary frontman of Queen, also to AIDS.
The compounded grief of losing those two vital people catalyzed him into action. In 1992, he founded the Elton John AIDS Foundation.
And what's remarkable is that he didn't just quietly donate a chunk of his royalties and slap his name on a letterhead. He actively used his status as this glamorous high society fixture to force people to pay attention and open their wallets.
Exactly. He leveraged the very things that made him famous, the excess, the parties, the celebrity connections, to fund the foundation.
The sources mention these massive, lavish events he would host. He started his annual Academy Awards party in 1993, which instantly became, and still remains, one of the most exclusive and lucrative events in Hollywood.
Definitely.
He also hosted the White Tie and Tiara Ball at his massive estate in Old Windsor. He would essentially trap billionaires and Hollywood elites in a room, feed them absurdly opulent food, and extract millions of dollars from them for charity. I read about one specific menu from these balls that featured a delicate truffle souffle, followed by a massive surf and turf, and for dessert, a giant Knickerbocker glory.
Which is such a brilliant, very British touch.
Tell us about that.
For those unfamiliar, a Knickerbocker glory is essentially a massive layered ice cream sundae served in a tall glass, very popular in British seaside towns. Serving that at a high society, white tie gala is a very cheeky, very Elton way of cutting through the pretension. But the results were incredibly serious. To date, the foundation has raised over $600 million globally to combat the disease.
And it wasn't just the money, was it?
No, it was the visibility. It's vital to recognize the cultural context of the early 1990s. He was fundamentally shifting societal awareness of HIV and AIDS during an era where it was still highly stigmatized, often ignored by governments, and deeply misunderstood by the public. He used his massive mainstream platform to force conversations that polite society was actively trying to avoid.
That cultural gravity he carried, his ability to unite the world through music in times of crisis, was never more apparent than in the summer of 1997.
A truly devastating year for him personally and for the world globally.
In the span of just a few weeks, he lost two extremely close friends to horrific, sudden tragedies. In July, the iconic fashion designer Gianni Versace was murdered outside his home in Miami. Elton was devastated. And then at the end of August, Princess Diana died in a horrific car crash in Paris.
The world was in an absolute state of shock. There was this unprecedented outpouring of public grief, and the British royal family was facing immense public scrutiny over their handling of the tragedy. They needed a moment of catharsis.
Right.
Elton John was asked to perform at Diana's funeral, which was to be held at Westminster Abbey, and broadcast to an estimated 2.5 billion people worldwide.
Imagine the pressure of that moment. He reaches out to Bernie Taupin. He asked Bernie to revise the lyrics of their classic 1973 song, Candle in the Wind. Now, the original song was written as a tribute to Marilyn Monroe. Elton asked Bernie to adapt it to honor Diana.
And Taupin agreed, and he rewrote the lyrics, changing the opening line from Goodbye Norma Jean to Goodbye England's Rose.
And Elton performed Candle in the Wind 1997 live at the funeral. And he stated he would only ever play that specific version once, and he kept his word.
It was a singular moment in history.
I remember vividly watching that broadcast. The absolute silence in the Abbey, the raw grief on his face as he played. The collective emotion of the entire globe was focused on him at that piano. And the impact of that specific recording is almost impossible to overstate.
It broke every record.
It sold over 33 million copies globally. It is officially verified by Guinness World Records as the best-selling chart single since the modern charts began in the 1950s. And he donated the proceeds, which amounted to roughly £55 million, entirely to Diana's charities. It transcended being a pop song. It became a global moment of shared mourning and healing.
It was a remarkable, unprecedented demonstration of how deeply embedded his music was in the global consciousness. He wasn't just a pop star anymore, he was a cultural pillar.
Absolutely.
And what is so fascinating about his career trajectory is that having reached that absolute pinnacle, having literally conquered the pop charts, rock arenas, and global philanthropy as the 90s ended and the 2000s began, he didn't rest. He sought out entirely new creative mountains to climb.
He turned his sights to Broadway. And honestly, he completely took over the world of musical theater.
He did. He teamed up with the legendary lyricist Tim Rice for Disney's animated film The Lion King in 1994. That project won him an Academy Award for Can You Feel the Love Tonight?
Such a classic.
Then they adapted it for Broadway in 1997, and the stage version eventually became the top-earning title in box office history for both stage and film.
And he didn't stop there. He wrote the music for Aida, which won him a Tony Award for Best Original Score in 2000. Then he wrote Billy Elliot the Musical in 2005, which was another massive, multi-award-winning global smash. I have to ask, though, from a psychological perspective, what drives an artist who has already achieved literally everything to tackle musical theater? It's a notoriously difficult, collaborative, exhausting medium.
I would speculate that for Elton John, musical theater represents the ultimate test of a melodist. Think about it. When you write and perform a pop song, you are relying heavily on your own larger-than-life persona, your voice, and your stage presence to sell it to the audience.
Right.
In musical theater, your music has to stand completely on its own. The composer is largely invisible. Your melodies have to tell a cohesive narrative, convey highly specific, complex character emotions, and move an audience without Elton John physically sitting on the stage to deliver it.
Wow. It's proof that the underlying musical architecture he creates is bulletproof. It works whether he's singing it or whether a kid playing Billy Elliot is singing it. So what does this all mean for his legacy as he moves into his later decades? As he becomes this literal fixture of the British establishment, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 1998, becoming Sir Elton John. You would expect him to just rest on his laurels, play the old hits, and coast into retirement.
But that is exactly what he refused to do. And that refusal is a crucial part of his extraordinary longevity. Unlike so many legacy acts who dismiss modern music, complain about the current state of the industry, or retreat entirely into pure nostalgia tours, Elton John actively, hungrily seeks out the new. He champions young artists.
His list of modern collaborations is staggering, and it spans literally every single genre. One of the most shocking was at the 2001 Grammys. Eminem was facing intense public backlash and protests over controversial lyrics that were widely condemned as homophobic. Who steps out onto the Grammy stage to perform the chorus of Eminem's hit song Stand With Him? Elton John.
A huge cultural moment.
It completely defied expectations and forced everyone to reevaluate the cultural conversation. Then in 2013, he is playing piano and singing backing vocals for the heavy desert rock bands Queens of the Stone Age. He just refuses to be boxed in.
And that collaborative spirit was incredibly evident during the COVID-19 pandemic. While the entire music industry was shut down, he created an entire album called The Lockdown Sessions, released in 2021. He collaborated over Zoom and in highly restricted studio sessions with artists ranging from Lil Nas X to Miley Cyrus to Dua Lipa.
I read an interview where he explained that making the Lockdown Sessions actually reminded him of his roots in the late 1960s. Before he was Elton John, he was just a humble session musician showing up to play piano on other people's tracks.
Right, coming full circle.
He loved returning to that role. He wasn't the star, he was just the piano player helping a younger artist realize their vision.
He genuinely loves being a fan of music. He hosts an Apple Music radio show called Rocket Hour, where his primary goal is to interview and showcase brand new artists. He has stated repeatedly that listening to new music, discovering 15-year-old artists who are just starting out, is what keeps him inspired, animated, and young. He refuses to let his musical curiosity stagnate.
And that curiosity pays off in tangible, historic ways. His collaboration with Dua Lipa, the Cold Heart Now remix, hit #1 in the UK in 2021. With that single hit, Elton John broke another record. He became the first solo artist in history to have UK top 10 hits across 6 different decades.
6 decades?
The 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. 6 decades of being at the bleeding edge of pop culture.
It is an unparalleled chart run. And interestingly, that massive late career resurgence ran parallel to his monumental farewell to the stage. He announced the Farewell Yellow Brick Road tour back in 2018. He cited a profound desire to finally step away from the grueling touring lifestyle and prioritize spending time with his husband and their 2 young sons.
And typical for Elton, his farewell wasn't just a quick lap around the globe. The tour spanned over 300 concerts worldwide, wrapping up in Stockholm in July 2023. At the time it concluded, it was officially the highest-grossing concert tour in history, a victory lap unlike any other.
But the magnetic pull of the stage just keeps calling him back, even when his health throws massive, unexpected curveballs.
Right. The sources note a very recent development. In the summer of 2024, he suffered a severe eye infection. It left him completely blind in his right eye and with very limited vision in his left. He publicly revealed this incredibly personal struggle in December 2024.
And yet, despite the significant vision loss and despite being officially retired from touring, what did he do? He returned to the stage to perform for 70,000 people at the Singapore Grand Prix in October 2025.
I have to ask you, why do that? Think about it. You have hundreds of millions of dollars. You have your EGOT. You have your loving family. You have secured your legacy tenfold. And you have tragically lost your vision. Why put yourself through the physical stress of traveling to Singapore to get back in front of 70,000 people?
I speculate that for Reginald Dwight, the quiet boy who hid behind the piano and the oversized fake Buddy Holly glasses to escape the unbearable tension of his childhood, the stage isn't just a job, it is his ultimate home. It's the place where he is most fully, unapologetically himself. The sheer energy exchange with a massive audience isn't just an ego boost, it is a fundamental part of his life force. You don't just turn off a source of energy that has sustained you for 60 years.
That is a beautiful way to look at it. So what does this all mean? We've explored the incredible music, the dark depths of the addiction, the world-changing philanthropy, and the ongoing 6-decade relevance. Let's transition into our final section, the highly complex personal life, the deeply held beliefs, and the passions of the man behind the legendary glasses.
To understand the man today, we have to look at how dramatically his personal life evolved alongside his musical one. In his early years, before the massive fame hit, he was actually engaged to a woman named Linda Woodrow. Interestingly, our sources note that in 2020, 50 years after he broke off their engagement, he stepped in to financially assist her with severe medical fees. It shows a remarkable sense of continued connection to his past.
After that engagement ended, he had his first significant gay relationship with his manager, John Reed. But his path to fully embracing his sexuality was long and complicated. In 1984, he shocked the public by marrying his close friend and sound engineer, a woman named Renee Blau.
That marriage lasted 4 years, ending in divorce in 1988. And it remained a complex part of his history. She actually sued him in 2020 over deeply personal details he shared about their time together in his 2019 autobiography.
His public statements about his sexuality evolved over time as well. He first came out as bisexual in a 1976 interview with Rolling Stone. Then years later in 1992, he told them he was quite comfortable being gay. And after decades of searching, he finally found lasting peace with the Canadian advertising executive and filmmaker David Furnish.
Their relationship is a testament to immense social change. They were among the very first couples to form a civil partnership in the UK when it became legal in 2005. When full marriage equality was achieved in 2014, they officially married. And they now have 2 sons, Zachary and Elijah, born via surrogate.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? About how an artist navigates massive personal evolution while constantly in the public eye.
Absolutely. Elton John has lived through and in many ways helped push forward a massive tectonic shift in LGBTQ+ rights globally. Think about the arc of his life. He went from being a young man terrified of international adoption laws when he briefly tried to adopt a boy from Ukraine in the 1990s to happily raising 2 sons with his legally wedded husband. His own personal timeline reflects the broader societal timeline of progress.
And his personal beliefs regarding religion are just as nuanced and fascinating. He is described as a self-declared atheist. He has strongly, often aggressively, criticized organized religion. He once stated he would ban religion completely because of its historical and ongoing role in turning hatred toward gay people.
Yet simultaneously, he deeply admires the core teachings of Jesus Christ.
Yes. He caused an absolute global stir in 2010 during an interview where he referred to Jesus as a compassionate, super-intelligent gay man who understood human problems. He received intense backlash and even death threats for that statement. But he wasn't trying to be merely provocative. He was making a point about empathy.
He essentially separates the restrictive bureaucracy and the exclusionary dogma of organized religion from the fundamental humanistic, loving teachings of Jesus. It is a highly complex, deeply personal theology that aligns with his own philanthropic worldview.
Okay, as we shift into his political views, I want to put my hands up and be crystal clear with you, the listener. We are strictly impartial here on the deep dive. We are not taking sides, we're not endorsing the left wing, and we are not criticizing the right wing, or vice versa. Our sole job today is to neutrally report what is documented in the source material about Elton John's own views and his political interactions.
Understood perfectly. And politically, Elton John's interactions are fascinatingly dichotomous. They cross lines in ways that few modern celebrities manage. Historically, he has been a strong vocal supporter of the UK Labour Party and the US Democratic Party.
For example, he performed for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2016, explicitly stating she was the only choice. And his relationship with the current Democratic leadership was highlighted in 2022, when President Joe Biden surprised him by awarding him the National Humanities Medal at the White House. Biden even shared a personal anecdote, noting that he used to sing Elton's hit Crocodile Rock to his young sons.
But his relationships across the political aisle are where the complexity really shows. Take his dynamic with Republican President George W. Bush. Elton was highly publicly critical of Bush regarding the invasion of Iraq, at one point calling him the worst thing that ever happened to America.
Wow, those are strong words.
But later on, he entirely turned his stance around and praised Bush, stating that George W. Bush was the president who had done the most on a global scale to combat the AIDS crisis in Africa. He was willing to publicly commend a political opponent when it aligned with his philanthropic goals.
And then there is his incredibly bizarre dynamic with Donald Trump. After Trump won the election, Elton politely declined an invitation to play at Trump's 2017 inauguration, stating that as a British national, he didn't feel it was appropriate to perform at an American political swearing-in.
But Donald Trump is a massive, highly vocal fan of Elton John's music. He played Elton's hits constantly at his political rallies to hype up the crowd. And most famously, Trump co-opted the title of Elton's 1972 hit song to nickname the North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un.
Oh, yes.
Trump stood at the podium during a speech at the United Nations and referred to Kim Jong-un as Little Rocket Man.
Trump even later claimed that he gave Kim Jong-un a CD of the song, signed by Elton. Now, you might expect a left-leaning celebrity to issue a furious cease-and-desist letter over their art being used for geopolitical insults. But what was Elton's reaction? In an interview with Variety, he was asked about it, and he just said, "I laughed. I thought it was brilliant." He simply refused to take himself or the situation too seriously in that moment.
It speaks to how deeply his music permeates literally all cultural and political boundaries. You have Joe Biden awarding him a prestigious medal for his humanities work, while Donald Trump uses his song lyrics to conduct high-stakes international diplomacy. At the same time, Elton isn't blindly loyal to his own preferred political parties.
Not at all. Very recently, in 2025, he fiercely turned on the UK Labour government, the very party he had historically campaigned for. He stated he felt incredibly betrayed over the government's plans to exempt massive tech firms from certain copyright laws for AI training. He was so angry he called the technology secretary a bit of a moron in the press. When push comes to shove, he prioritizes the rights of artists and creators over any partisan political loyalty.
He remains a fiercely independent thinker. And before we conclude, we cannot talk about his passions without mentioning his absolute obsession with football.
Yes, the English football team, Watford FC. He has been a massive fan of the club since he was a young boy standing on the terraces. In 1976, right at the absolute peak of his global fame, he became the chairman and director of the club.
And he didn't just buy it for a photo op. He invested huge sums of his own money into the club. He appointed Graham Taylor as the manager, and together they achieved a minor miracle in the sport. They took Watford, a relatively small club, up 3 divisions, all the way to the first division. For our American listeners, it's roughly the equivalent of taking a minor league baseball team and funding them all the way to the World Series. They even reached the FA Cup final at Wembley Stadium in 1984.
For a man who travels the globe on private jets, hangs out with British royalty, and throws million-dollar Oscar parties, why invest so heavily, both financially and emotionally, in a local English football club?
I speculate that it fundamentally grounds him to his roots. It provides a tangible, visceral connection to the working-class environment of his youth in Pinner. The football pitch is a place where he isn't Sir Elton John, the global icon. He's just another frantic fan hoping his team scores a goal. It is something real, gritty, and grounded outside the insulated, luxurious bubble of global pop superstardom.
Okay, bringing it all together. We have traced an absolutely incredible, sprawling arc with you today. We started with Reginald Dwight, the quiet, anxious boy in the council house who channeled his strict classical piano training and his desperate desire to escape his home life into something extraordinary. We watched him construct the unstoppable, feathered, platform boot-wearing force of nature that is Elton Hercules John. We've seen him transition from playing Jim Reeves covers in local pubs to selling 300 million records globally. We explored how he fought his way out of the darkest, most isolating depths of chemical addiction to reach the absolute heights of global philanthropy, saving countless lives in the process. He is a true pop culture constant, an artist who survived by never losing his profound curiosity for the new.
Indeed. It is a life lived in vibrant, unforgettable color. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something we touched on earlier regarding his uniquely successful creative process. Think about Elton John and Bernie Taupin never writing a single song in the same room. We live in a world where we are constantly told that collaboration requires physical closeness. We assume it requires constant communication, arguing, hashing things out together in endless meetings. But what if the secret to lifelong, legendary creative success is actually distance? What if giving your partner total, uncompromised freedom over their domain and literally stepping out of the room is the ultimate act of professional trust? The next time you have to collaborate on a massive project with a colleague or a friend, ask yourself, would this outcome actually be better if we just stayed out of each other's way?
What an amazing, counterintuitive thought to end on. Thank you so much for exploring these incredible sources with us on this deep dive. Keep asking those big questions. Keep looking for those surprising aha moments in the world around you. And we absolutely cannot wait to see you on our next learning journey.